Well, welcome to today's topic for the ITAM Kitchen. You know, the ITAM Kitchen, today's session, we're talking about politics and how we deal with this. Because when we think about politics, we think about national things, we think about government, et cetera, right? But now you think about politics when it comes to inside the organization, a whole different equation. Whole different topic, and we have to figure out, okay, how do we deal with this? Because we're never taught for this. Because we always said we don't want to be in politics. That's why we're in IT, right? Welcome. My name is Bill, Mr. Bill. I'm a recovering IT practitioner. Lots of experience in being here at ITAM Kitchen is being able to help enable others on that part. Been recognized for what my accomplishments are, but it's not just the recognition. It's about being able to get back insight and move forward beyond anything you see from the elementary type of trainings, well beyond that. And that's the topics we've been talking about actually since we started this in January 7th of last month. And we've been going every day. We're having fun. And this in particular is about being able to say, how do we make it all work? All right. We think about when we take the approach when we're around a kitchen table, right? Or around a kitchen island at a party or talk about it. It's just, we're having kitchen talk, right? We're having talks amongst friends. That's the whole idea here. Put that next step. We've got a lot of contributions, how we're moving forward. But also, it's about you. So we're looking for your insights, making that happen, be able to help them so you're better enabled to do what you need to, because you're being put in scenarios you never realized you were going to. We totally get it. Been doing about 30 years myself, and sometimes you never know what you're going to walk into. We'll have some guests here. Have Rob and Deanna back. Let's let them introduce themselves, and we'll dig right into the topic and just run with it at that point. Rob, you want to start off?
Sure. I'm Rob Collins. I'm an IT practitioner with 30 plus years of experience, going all the way back to service with the military and the Marines, and then through 2 government agencies and as a consultant for private firms. Deanna.
Hi, I'm Deanna Hennigar. I too have been in IT business for a large number of years, and kind of really enjoy it. And I don't know. Politics is kind of stumping me right now. That's all. I consider myself a diplomat in the sea of politicians. Yeah. So I know the game, but I don't really like to play the game. So.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you need a therapy dog to help you through. Right. This is Dana, by the way. Yes, exactly. Yes. And the therapy dog goes a long ways when you start dealing with politics. It's the best way to put it. So yes, welcome to the screen there, Dana. Absolutely. So when it comes to politics, okay, Bill, of all things, why politics? It was a little bit of a surprise for all of us, right? It's one of those things you think about in the morning. It's like, okay, how do we deal with it? Because honestly, it's one of the things we try to stay away from, right? But it's also one of the, and we stay away from it because we're not sure how to work with it. We're not taught this. We're taught with politics. We're taught to elect people. Right? We're talking about, and sometimes in different parties here in the U.S. and could be in different countries as well. All sorts of different names for them, and yes, there's various names even for those names. But being able in the workplace, I think first, how you move. Sometimes that's what happens, right? Have to think about, okay, how do we deal with perception? And I guess the first thing we want to do is let's define what politics actually means. And from there, we can dig into it and talk to this entire topic. Because this is not an easy topic. This is actually a very difficult topic, right? This is a topic that you say, oh, I get trained, certified, et cetera. Great. You can do all this stuff. Here's the process. Here's all the outline, et cetera. But now you have to figure out how to work with people. And the people aspect is where some of the politics come in play, right? So from there, how do we want to define politics? Deanna, Rob, what comes to mind here? So let's go through the definition first.
Yeah, I think that it's important to define it and then and then focus on the context, for instance, from an ITAM perspective. So politics is the art of compromise. Politics is the process by which people will come together, make collective decisions, manage conflict, and or distribute resources. Okay, so look at it from that perspective. When you consider that, consider what it is that you're trying to do, who you're pitching to, and who benefits. There's a number of great books out there. I think Getting to Yes is one of those that comes to mind. And there are a variety of others. By all means, if you know of any comment in the chat, and help us out with that.
Please do.
But the whole idea, though, is that you want something, the other side wants something, and somewhere you meet in the middle eventually. This could be a long, drawn-out sort of like argument, if you will, or you could come to consensus fairly quickly if you realize that value on both sides for the effort. So I'm going to leave it at that, and then we'll continue. Deanna, what are your thoughts?
A lot of the time when I've seen politics working in a company, it's supposed to have the art of compromise, but sometimes someone goes, no, I'm just going to do it my way. I've been at companies that it was whoever the manager of the day was. And that was kind of hard because you get a new manager, the next thing you know, you're getting all new equipment, and you just barely got equipment 6-7 months ago. I don't see the organization, well, I haven't been involved where an organization really did their politics well. And I don't know if there is a company that does their politics well.
For me, I try to, when you bring politics to an organization, again, this is how we orchestrate ourselves within politics and defining, right? Ideally, you don't want to have politics at all, right? In the politics, typically is due to ego.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? It's all about ego. And when you realize that, it comes back to basics, right? When you come back to and you realize it's by ego, now you realize sometimes how people have become in their roles, right? And instead of, for us, we like to work with people. Typically, it's not about ego. There are some asset management folks, and you may be one of them, hopefully you're not, and you're trying to evolve beyond that. But your ego is helping drive your initiative because you've had that success. You've had the ability to get your point across. You've had your ability to build a team. So you're going to have a little bit of that, and I want you to have that. I'm not saying you shouldn't, but it's being able to work with yourself as well as others to say, how do you work with the ego to say, you know what, you have an ego. That's awesome. I want you to have ego because that helps your drive. That's right. It's really trying to drive you forward. That's what you're living on. For personal development, that's a whole separate discussion. We won't go there for this topic, for this discussion. But it helps you drive forward. And maybe it's helping you lead, right? And some people love to lead on ego. That part. So from that standpoint, there's a lot of success. But where it becomes to where the compromise is typically where the struggle happens, right? And being able to work with others that are working with not just yourself and your own ego, but others with the some type of scenario, their own, I'll say other initiatives, right? Other agendas. And by the way, when we're talking about this, because we've been kind of intermixing commercial and government, et cetera, it doesn't matter. It's all across the board. It doesn't matter. This is a tough topic. It's a really tough topic. We're only going to hit from high level because that's all the time we have. But from this standpoint, it's going to help us figure out, okay, what those next topics we need to dig into. Because when you realize you have somebody been driven by ego, that's the drive and they're leading that way. There's an agenda they have in place. Maybe they're trying to retire in a couple of years. They just don't want to fail, right? Maybe we're looking at that. Maybe they have a whole separate initiative. They want to bring it in. They're having a conversation with a different vendor. They want to bring that vendor in, right? That doesn't align with what you're having. Again, I'm just providing use cases, examples. What these are. Maybe there's an initiative where you already have a large platform vendor right in there, but it doesn't meet your needs. It's like, guys, I don't want this, but they're forcing you into that product, right? Into that solution, and you have to figure out how to work that through. It's like, guys, it's not going to work. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to spend $14 million on this anyways, and you're going to eat it. And if it fails, it's on you. This is real scenario. This is real world, right? Might go a little extreme on the numbers. Maybe, maybe not. That's up to you in your scenario. But when you start to figure out, okay, how are you going to work with this? These are actually things we need to work through and figure out, okay, what is that next step? Because you didn't agree to walk into this. You agree to complete the role, right? We've been talking about the roles and how you work with that. You agree to like, okay, I want asset management and I know how the process works. I know how to work with people. I know how the collaboration. I want teamwork, right? And you run into this, it's like, I put my hands up. Where am I going to go, right? And I don't want you to think like that. I mean, I can, sometimes you have to say, but that is a good point. Let me drive to that point is when is it enough? Are you willing to engage in it or not, right? What is enough? And let's drive back and let's go down a specific example. Because what is enough, it's not about giving up. It's about saying, I'm done. I'm done with this task. I need to go somewhere else. And some of us are dealing with that right now. You could be maybe you're a solution provider and you work for a company or an outsourcing agreement. It's like, guys, I just can't take it anymore. There's a lot of people like this. A lot. If you're like that, feel free to chime in. You might want to do a separate independent DM to me or to us versus on the public forum. I totally get it. For just job security, no problem. But if you need to talk, absolutely. But you also need to figure out what your parameters are when you start walking into this. And you need to figure out this. And the reason why I hit this part of the conversation first is figure out, okay, so you have a constraint when you walk into the conversation, say, you know what, I'm gonna dabble for a little bit. I'm gonna play in this realm. But if it gets too deep, I cannot continue. And you know your constraints. And there's something to be said for that, right? On one side, you can say it's a weakness. It's not. That's actually a strength.
Mm-hmm.
You know what your limitations are because everyone has different ways of working with the politics and egos, et cetera. And I'm just I went down the politics path because that's a common topic we determine here. But when you start working with that, you got to figure out, okay, what are you willing to do and not do?
Right. Setting boundaries.
Yes, exactly. And this goes for any role you have. Because maybe you took the role because you need the monetary side. But it's like you didn't realize you were going to deal with this part, right? And I'll give an example. I took a project one time working for the government. And I did it it's like, okay, fine. They want to look extreme. It's like, well, you have to have a 3-year contract. It was crazy. But it's like, okay, fine, whatever. Go background check, fine, whatever. I was totally cool on that. But that wasn't the crazy part. The crazy part for me was the politics once I got on the team. Pretty proficient what I do is the best way to put it. But what I found out was they had no intention of using my skills. They were using my title. They're using my background in order to look good in front of a customer. That's all it was.
Okay.
And from that, what I learned that the role wasn't for me because I wasn't trying to build my empire. That wasn't it. I couldn't be successful. Go back to your boundaries, but you also have to define what your success. Again, it just had to be a government deal. This could be anywhere, right? Just use an example. But for me, I determined within a very short period of time, actually I've got a couple examples of this now I think, but one government, one commercial, is I said after a while, it's like, this isn't for me. I'm not having fun.
Now, one of the things I've learned not to say is, why did you hire me if you don't want to listen to the things I've been hired to do? And try not to say that one because then you say goodbye.
That's a very good point. But the reason why you talk about these boundaries and you understand their fun factor of success is, again, you understand what you're willing to walk into, because what happens is when you start going down this path of engaging, you're jumping all in.
Yeah.
You can't just dip a toe. You're jumping all in. And when that happens, you're not going to see things clearly anymore. You're now going to have your skewed view. And when you define what your boundaries are, you're going to say, okay, I have this as mile markers, my boundaries up top. I need to make sure that when I'm down in the weeds, that I'm still on target. If I'm not on target, I need to pull myself out and say, okay, I need to review where I am. Right? And I say that from a constructive perspective because it doesn't matter whether we're professional consultants. It doesn't matter whether we're working for an organization. It doesn't matter whether we're a practitioner, right? We're going to run into this, right? There's a song from the back in the 80s called "The Politics of Dancing," right? That's what it reminds me of, right? It's kind of humorous, and if you haven't looked it up and said it's really a cool song. It was very popular in the 80s, early 80s. But the whole idea is when you talk about your dance here, you have to figure out what you're going to engage in, how you're going to look at that.
Yeah.
Again, this is not something you're going to find. If you look at politics within the college curriculum or university, right, they're going to teach you about government politics and how to deal with it. It's about people. We start digging into it, people, because we get so caught up, let's say, in politics as far as we hear it. We'll just pick on the U.S., right? We hear politics on a whole different level, right? And what we hear on the inside of the country is different than what's on the outside country, outside the U.S., right? It's outside our borders. So you have to figure out, okay, but the one thing we always talk about is don't talk about politics. We were taught that. But in this case, we had to figure out how we work with the politics inside the organization. So we had to figure out what the fun factor to help move forward. And that's where I wanted to help us drive that next step. Is when we start understanding some of those boundaries, okay, what kind of framework can we put in place to say, the boundaries part of it, to say, that's enough, or here's where else we can go. Because when it comes to the compromise, let's go down there, right? That's about negotiation sometimes, right?
Yep. And that's as applicable at all levels, no matter where or how you're dealing with it. Yeah.
That's back to getting the yes as a good example. I've got several books down here. I've got leading change.
Oh yeah, good.
That's another one. That's a great book. What Matters. That's another one. I actually have a negotiation book. I think I got that from the university actually. There's several others. The effective leadership, the servants. There's all sorts of different books like that talk about this, right? But you talk about negotiation. You're talking about having an open mind. Because what you'll learn, it's maturity, I'll be honest. Age helps with this, and the ongoing experience is when you talk about negotiation, open mind, and keep an open mind, you also have to realize you may not be the person to help work through this compromise. And you have to realize that from that standpoint, you have to figure out, okay, where are you going to further drive that dialogue, right? How are you going to help yourself to say, you know what? I know you want to go here, but we're not looking at the bigger initiative. We're not saying we're not aligned to the company. And you might find out you're in the wrong group. You're in the wrong individual, right? Because what happens with the compromise and open mind, and you have to work with others that are sometimes closed-minded, right? And they're not looking that next step. But let's come with examples, right? Let's go with examples to figure out, okay, how do we work through this?
This kind of brings to mind a phrase I know. Don't confuse me with the facts. My mind is already made up.
Yeah,
and then you don't know what you can present or not present because they've already decided they're not going to listen.
Oh yeah.
And that's, I've always found interesting.
Well, in that scenario, let's leverage that as a use case. So I think that's a great use case to drive into, because that's typically what we run into, right? Is you walk in a conversation. You may say it's not politics. It might be just due to their own initiative, their own drive. That's okay. But not unwilling to listen.
Yeah. Even if you show them the bottom line, I mean that's the ROI and things like that. That's what has confused me in the past. Mm-hmm. That even we can give you a much better solution, but you don't want to listen to it because like you said yesterday, he played golf with someone.
Yeah.
I don't know how to play golf.
Or you spent an awful lot of money implementing a product that didn't go so well.
Right.
But because of the amount, it's like, well, we've got to save face, or we've got to kind of defend our position, ride it out for a year or two,
Yeah.
And lose value along the way. I mean, the one response to those situations I've had is to look the person in the eye or across the table and say, help me understand why this is your position.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get them to talk, sure there's other ways to do it, but that's definitely a similar situation that came to mind as well, where we found the solution to a problem, but at the enterprise level, right, they refused to hear the solution. And we went so far as to sit down and have a meeting with them for an hour and a half to discuss it. And I had my whole team with me, so that I had every resource. I didn't have to think of an answer to the questions from the other side. I would just simply say, to answer that question, this guy, he's a developer. He found the solution to the problem in under 3 hours and implemented and tested it. We're willing to give you the solution to the problem right now. But even then, because of ego and pride, the other side didn't want to move.
Yeah.
And you come to it from multiple angles. You have from the executive perspective, you talk about saving face. Maybe it's from a project perspective where they've had failed implementations before. So it's actually from an ego perspective. They don't want to change because then that means they failed. And to them, it's step on their ego, which they don't realize by saying, I need to do a redo, helps them grow.
Yeah, it fixes it too, especially if the company is suffering because of it. This is not how do you say, it's contrary to the duty and the ethics of the position on the other side. Their job is to solve problems, make things better, make money, or improve efficiency.
Right.
So that kind of a position to me is, like I say, and I think it hits us all kind of the same way when you're in the situations.
Absolutely. And sometimes you have to realize, again, what you're walking into. This might catch you totally blindside. And it's like, you think you're doing go, make it happen. You're providing the output you can. And it's like, and there's something that happens, to your point, different level of management, that decision, right? Or leadership. And this could be a manager, it could be a platform director. I've seen that happen too. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, well, that's not what I told them. Therefore, because it's not what I told them, you cannot proceed with your solution where you're headed. And I will say that real little scenario happens more often than not these days from the platform owner perspective, because they just don't understand it. So the question is, how do we work through this, right? I think part of what we had up here is ask them to provide their perspective, right? And also, if you can, ask them, okay, what does leadership think? Mm-hmm. If you need to put that in place. And that's a touchy subject. That's touchy to a degree. But it's like, okay, we have this, but that's not kind of from best practice. Where are we from an organization, right? Maybe you need a different perspective to be brought into it. Yeah, that's what comes to mind for me. Any other thoughts there?
What if they're looking like always saying that, well, the CMDB is wrong, but they don't want to fix their asset table? I know I brought that up before. It's how do you get them to see where the real problem is? You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix something that will never be fixed because you don't do the step in front of it.
Or maybe the CMDB, they're just popping with discovery data they're not normalizing, right? Or they're saying, I'm not accepting for what it is, and they're just using it as more of a data lake of data.
Yeah. Or just blaming the tool when they're not using the tool correctly.
Yeah. And that's not uncommon these days at all, right? And that's where we run into. And if there's any comments you want to put in there in the chat, feel free to put any comments in there. I don't think it's coming up so far. Because when we talk about this is real.
Yeah.
And it's not just about one vendor, or platforms or anything like that. And yes, you can talk about the big platform that everyone loves or hates. I've heard it also been removed from environments because of the complexity of the platform and some of these issues.
Yeah.
It just became too much inside the organization. And leadership says, no, we're not going to deal with this anymore. Why do I need to embrace this? Because it impacts the culture, right? It just depends how high it goes. But when you start talking about unwilling to listen, right, is being able to say, okay, let's get the clarity of the problem. Let's really understand it and understand I'll say idiosyncrasies. Something like that. Things like that.
There's another thing that comes to mind in this discussion, and this is you can, from a negotiating tactic, right? What you can do is you can start with provide statements to which you're fairly certain the other side can agree to. So if you start with the things that everybody agrees to, you can then form the remainder of the argument from that perspective. And then you can even say, now there are going to be things we're going to disagree on. So let's list those. Let's try to address those as well. Because then at least this provides some path to follow.
Good point. Yeah, because when you start dividing those next steps, that's really where you want to go.
Yeah.
To your point, Rob, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any examples that we want to talk about in there as far as where scenarios that we've walked into? And I'm sure we have hundreds, right? But is there something that you want to talk about that you've had this scenario? Because this is, again, we just went in total deep, right? So we're talking about folks that are in over our heads. We're drowning, right? And it's like,
yeah,
what in the world are we doing? Because I didn't agree to this. This was not the job description, right? But at the same time, okay, we need to address this in being able to sell. And this is our opportunity also to help mentor others out here and say, you're not alone, right? This is because for me, having the collaboration like this is number one. Be around friends that you can actually bounce ideas off of. You can collaborate with. There is a safe environment. Typically, not posting on social media is a good thing in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll
true.
an article about this. We'll put that in place. So we'll talk about how we put that, make it happen. But you don't just complain about an organization because we don't know who's watching on the other side. I'll be brutally honest. So you want to be careful in that. So, a little disclaimer. Careful how you communicate, but you also want to be around a community of friends that you can trust, right? And that could be a coworker, someone inside the company. It could be someone within the community, like a co-op or something like that, from that standpoint, or a trusted advisor that you have. Say, I just need help, right? But when you start talking about these scenarios, what comes to mind? Any stories that come to mind here?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
First, I describe myself, for instance, as being 30-year plus expert in IT asset management, right? So somewhere along that experience, right, think about the first time that you actually ran like headlong into direct IT asset management related problems or questions, right? And for me, that moment was an audit that was being performed for being out of compliance, right? So the actions that we ended up taking between myself and who I was directly reporting to, and at the time she was being given basically head of all IT affairs of any kind, project management, development, what would eventually become asset management through me. And so we identified the risk around this particular problem. And so for us, we needed to pull together an argument and demonstrate to the executive leadership, or if you will, enterprise leadership, to put it more accurately, that this isn't something that you can continue to ignore. And we decided we're going to build an ITAM program. That's it. we're through with this risk. We have good practices, but we're tired of being pulled in under your failures, to put it bluntly. And so that then became quite an exercise around forming a solid argument, pulling an inventory, and actually beginning to record those processes. So we had something, of substance to show to the enterprise leadership. Although this was rejected, unfortunately, in the midst of their software audit, we actually also provided the solution that reduced that penalty from $500,000 down to $30K. Now, once that was visible, they started to pay some attention. And we did this for just one division, let's say out of 18 for a state agency. So that kind of began sort of the track for everybody involved into IT asset management. Formalized, establishing a program, recording all your workflows and processes, inventory, the whole kit and caboodle, for lack of a better term at the moment.
You're right, because when a compliance, everyone's on pins and needles, right?
Yeah.
Especially the multi-million dollars, because people say, well, we don't have the budget. It has more to do with just budget, right? This is literally, when you start talking about compliance, people have not been doing their jobs. And it becomes that spotlight. When you start putting a spotlight on someone, no one likes to be in the spotlight. Well, I do, but that's a whole different story. Because for me, and the reason why I say I do, I've learned how to work with it. Now, do I know it all? I don't. But what I've learned is when I start getting the spotlight, it's the opportunity for me not to just to shine. I don't say that egotistically. It's also the opportunity for me to grow. And when I learn how to grow in that part, I can also raise my hand. It's like, I've never done this before. I'm going to figure it out because you put me in the corner, but I'm going to need some help, right? And that spotlight is one of the best things that happen. Yeah. And because, okay, you say, oh, I'm going to fail. You might fail anyways.
Yeah.
Right. For example, Rob, the example you just provided, you still had to pay what, $30,000 or I think $30,000 or what? It was a smaller amount on that audit. Right?
The agency still had to do it. Yeah, they still had to pay.
You still had to pay a little bit,
really reduced.
But and they may say, well, I still had to pay, so therefore it was a failure. Yeah, okay. If you want to take it that perspective, but let's step back. And I think you did a great perspective of reframing that, right? And sometimes you have to think about that. Great.
And this takes us back to yesterday's conversation around doing the postmortem or the after action report or the debriefing, those things. So anytime that those things do happen, those are great lessons if they're captured, if they're documented, and if you have plans for mitigating those same failures going forward into the future.
Exactly. And that also, from a credibility perspective, back on the politics, which is our core topic, right? Helps you from a credibility perspective. Because you've done a couple things now. Rob just brought up documenting. And you're going to put it to the entire team so that there's overall awareness of what they've been through. You provide an example. Actually, this awareness actually went to the entire agency as a whole, right? Or multiple agencies, whether the government, the local government.
Started.
Yeah,
it started knowledge based. We call that like the body of knowledge around your what do they call that? Oh my goodness, it's terrible and embarrassing. The words like skipping my head now. Like your knowledge base, your knowledge framework.
Yep. That's okay. You're recovering from the birthday list that we had yesterday. So there you go. So belated happy birthday, by the way. We all have our moments. But it also it provides that foundation, and that's where, from a politics perspective, the facts. Deanna, I think you were talking about that, right? Yeah. It provides those facts that you can base it upon. It's like, you know what? I know we're working on all this other stuff, but still, this is important, and here's why. It helps that prioritization. Even though you may not have budget for this whole new initiative, it's like, oh wow, somehow we need to swizzle this in and inject it, and make this part of the bigger initiative because of X, Y, and Z. Honestly, that's how politics work, right? Back to that negotiation. How do you influence? How do you put it in there? And there's lots of examples we can have from a standpoint. But honestly, you want good examples how that works. I'm not trying to get you to be a politician when I say this. I can at least say from the U.S., look at the politics of some of the bills that go through Congress. and what's included with that and what they inject with that, right? And it's, again, a compromise. What else do you put in here? It's still the same budget. Maybe it goes up by 100K or something. I don't know. But you can look at that, because when you start researching it, and be a researcher when I say this, not a politician, but be a researcher, you realize how the compromise works. And it's like, oh, wow, this is how we're doing in the government? Okay. Now I've learned lessons. And all this is documented, by the way. This is free stuff. This is all the meeting minutes are out there, things like that, just as an example. But to your point, Rob, I think this was a great example, right? How do you put that compliance out? How do you move forward? How do you put that out there? Deanna, any thoughts on your side?
Yeah, sometimes you have to remind them that the type of failure is going to make you look bad in the industry or out, or even with the government. Trying to explain to a company that just because you went bankrupt doesn't mean you don't have responsibility for your hardware anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That was I just really didn't understand that. Well, the company we became and the company that bought the product, they're not the same. I said, but you kept all the products. You didn't buy new. They still have to be on your fixed asset book records. Well, no, we didn't buy them. You absorb them, because it's almost like an acquisition when you no longer have your company, goes bankrupt, and then an intermediary company takes you over to get you well again. And no, the equipment has to transfer to you. It doesn't just like disappear and you no longer own it. And I found that very frustrating, because the old company wasn't listening, that they wasn't on the books right, and the new company wasn't listening, that it's not on their books at all. And it's like, well, you're not in compliance with the government regulations at that point. And those words didn't seem to go anywhere. So ego takes funny, it's just a funny bedfellow to me. I guess because I'm a trainer, I have to teach in the right order. You have to listen to me. I have to review you. I have to test you on it, so that we're making sure the communication is there.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And if there's no communication, it makes it really hard. There's no respect.
Great point. That's a great point.
Politics makes strange bedfellows.
Yes, it does.
Charles W. Warner.
And we're only there to help. I mean, it's not like we want you to fail.
Exactly. And that's why I want to say it's typically communication driven as a whole, right? And being able to say, okay, how do we work through this? How can we collectively go that next step? And you might say, well, that's kind of team building. It is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also part of politics, right? When you work through that, is figure out, okay, how do you work through the compromise and say, how do we drive this? How do you work through that?
I mean, the owner and the president, they're still part of the team.
Yep. And we can, there's ego everywhere, right?
Yes.
But the most important part here on this part, you don't want to be part of that ego driven initiative. Well, it's not initiative. Ego driven issue. That's really where the word I'm looking for. Because when you start stepping back and you're more objective, right? Let's go through some of the solutioning in this one. You start being more objective, right?
Yeah.
Remove emotion. You drive clarity. What's the next word that comes to mind on that one? Emotion, clarity. You're also helping.
Present a solution.
Yeah. in your collectively, actually, where I was going to go with that is you're collectively determining the solution, right?
Yeah.
You're determining. See, there was a comment just came in. Over there. Oh, just books. Is being able to say, okay, if you're starting collectively, then you're also this is where your buy-in's happening, right? It's like, well, how's it working? Is because maybe that collectively driving the solution, the person who's driving the politics may say, you know what, there's this big obstacle we have, I can clear that out of the way for him. So it's actually turning that around. You now have a confident, what's the right word? Right? You have someone, a colleague, to actually help you through this. That's actually helping from that initiative that actually was on the other side of the table from you before, because now they see how it can benefit them, right? And that's the important part, is that personality and that driving that conversation, that drives additional clarity. You may say, well, I don't want to get caught up in that. I'll be honest, you're going to get caught up in it. If it's there, you're going to get caught up in another, because asset management touches everything. That's how that works, right? But sometimes also you have to say, back to the point, it's like, this is as far as I can take this.
Mm-hmm.
Constraint. It's not that you don't want to grow, not that you don't want to thrive, but maybe it's well beyond anything that you could do. It's like, I need to talk to someone else. You need to bring in additional resources to assist or guide or mentorship, right? And put that in place. And that's important too. I think additional books. I got like 200 books right in front of me.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to grab it in a format that makes it easy to put into the chat for reference, so people can come back and go, oh, look at this one, etc.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to see if there's a quick one here. And sometimes, here's one of the best ways to learn in negotiation, if you want to do that and compromise. Read some books on sales.
Yep.
The Zig Ziglar, great individual when you talk about books, right? So I know we kind of just went off topic a little bit. Some of the books by Zig Ziglar, stuff like that. It's like, well, those are sales. You're right, because you're actually trying to sell.
Yep.
But that helps you work through this, right? Because you're actually providing your case, and that's the other part behind this is you're collectively driving the solution. As far as we're trying to be objective, collectively driving the solution. They identify gaps. As we said yesterday, we're identifying resources, resource needs.
One of the other things I found is most people, if you're having a problem with someone, other people are having the same problem with that same person. They know what the elephant in the room is, and they know that they can't do anything about it. It's like, if your purchasing manager only buys when he's on the golf course shaking hands with somebody, doesn't realize that we already have more than we need of the same type of product, but you're only buying it because you agreed to do it with someone else. No one else is in the buy-in with that.
You're absolutely right. And to that point, as you can notice in this entire session, right, the enthusiasm is not where it usually is.
No, it's not.
As far as amongst everybody, right? This is a really hard topic. I'm just going to bring us back to core, right? It's a really hard topic. So you're seeing us struggle with the topic is because we're struggling as well. Even those that have been around it for a while, right? We're struggling as well. It's not that we know all the answers. By no means are we going to know all the answers on this stuff. But are we trying to figure out, okay, how can we move that forward? We have. But have we failed along the way to say, okay, or maybe lost a job because we didn't agree with somebody? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to bring that back, because when you think about the tone of the conversation is extremely important as well, right? You have to figure out, okay, how can you bring the energy? As Brendan Bouchard says, it's like you are the power plant. You have to drive, that energy is coming from you to help protect others. How are you driving the energy towards getting through this scenario? And this is a tough one. This is like probably the toughest part. This is tougher than anything you're ever going to see in a certification exam, right? Right. The working through politics, right? So again, we don't hit the little topics, we hit the heavy ones. Come on, what the heck? We have fun, because when you get through this stuff, you understand some of the basics here.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, you've got 90 years of experience right here, just us here on the screen, right?
Yeah.
And we're still saying, you're going to learn some of this on your own. We mean it. We absolutely mean it, right? Because when you start thinking about how you're going to work through this, we all have challenges. We're going to have challenges. We have our own fears, trials, and tribulations, right? It's not about, okay, how well you do or didn't do it. If we did, trust me, we'd get a whole different conversation on this one, right? But this is why there are millions of books talking about politics, compromise, selling, right? Because we have to work through that. And being able to say, okay, how do we positively influence the scenario? And that's not easy.
And we are trying to be positive about it. We don't want to be negative. We won't ever say you're doing it wrong because we want to be right. We have history behind us that we've experienced that it's been done wrong. That's why you hired us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the context. And absolutely. It's like, you're paying us for this. We're going to give you what we believe is the solution. If we give this to you, and like you pointed out earlier, and you don't follow it, that's entirely up to you. That you're taking that risk on. But it's why we're here. It's why we're discussing.
It's important to put that in perspective. And also with that, I actually had this happen with the last place I was working. We'll just say they were going a totally different model where it was, and we were not helping customers. I'm just going to say it. I'm just saying straight out, right? And from that standpoint, I struggled with some of the fundamentals. I really struggled with it. And it's like, well, you do this. It's like, you don't treat customers like that. Fundamental stuff, right? So when I was released from that role, it wasn't due to lack of performance or anything. Actually, it was just the opposite. There was lack of a congruence with where the organization wanted to go. And sometimes you have to say, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It's time to move on.
There is a thing, I think that there's a thing to be said about that, though, too. And really, it depends on how you stand by your own standards, right? And how you represent yourself. And what you're willing to compromise and otherwise not. I've been in situations where the attitude was to sugarcoat everything, right? It was going to the customer, but that runs contrary to the job itself, which was to advise them in the best way possible, the best solutions. And then sometimes you have to deliver bad news, and there are many ways to do it. I was asked, how do you deliver bad news? The answer that I gave is very simple. It's fairly direct. It is what it is, what the risk is, what value may be on the line, so that you're aware, right? And because you also want to maintain and or elevate the trust that the person has in you, the customer has in you, right? And so they need to know. They need to know, how bad a thing is. Because if not, then they're ill-advised. And if they're ill-advised, then, then there's a case where they can come back and they can say, you didn't advise us accordingly, not properly. They can argue for refunds, and mess up your reputation. So those things are critically important. So hold the line, do it politically correct, if this is the case when you're speaking to people. And hopefully that'll further develop that trust that they have in you. If that happens, you're likely to get other business by reference from that customer.
We're not yes people.
Exactly.
We are fact-based driven to help you to get your company working
Yeah.
correctly.
Yeah.
We are fact-based. Not, we have to have an ego to be able to get up and say hello to you, but we don't have an ego in your issue.
Yeah.
We have an ego in correcting what we see is wrong. Or,
It is.
yeah,
Your interest is our interest.
yes,
And also keep in mind, you may not be wanting to address any of this, right? So I totally respect that as well. And you may go back to your management and say, this isn't for me. That's totally acceptable.
Mhm.
We're giving examples how to work through this.
Yep.
But you also have the right to say, not me.
Yeah.
To raise your hand on that.
Yeah.
You may be forced into it as well, but realize you have that right for yourself. Back to your point, what's your own ethics? What's your reputation? There's probably additional bullets I can throw on this, right?
Mhm.
Is what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do and learn?
Yeah.
And if it's not for you, it's not for you. That's totally good. People will
Yeah.
accept you for who you are. Even if you're removed from the role. Let me say that too, because you may be removed from the role because you didn't complete that task or you didn't meet the qualifications or specifications they needed for dealing with some of those issues. It is a blessing, right? He said, well, that's really negative and we need jobs. It's like, you do, but you need the right job. We've been talking about this for weeks now, right? But not months, the right job. You need the right job. If that culture's in alignment's not for you, that happens regularly, right? You can say, that's not me. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Because here's what happens. Think about if you don't say no. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't say no, what happens to you at that point? So let's go down a few of those moments as we're wrapping up. Right. So if you're in the wrong role and you're having to deal with politics, you don't like it. What happens to in our own head? Let's go through that. What comes to mind, Rob, Deanna? I'll start with you.
Yeah.
well,
If,
yeah.
well, go ahead, Deanna.
I was gonna say you kind of feel as if you lose your own self-esteem. Your own like, I've been working this, I know this, and you feel lost inside.
Excellent.
Rob,
Yeah. If you don't, you're liable to get the attitude or the opinion of management that, you know what, since you didn't say no or you love this stuff, we're going to give you all of these jobs.
yeah,
6 years worth of work, my man, because you love this stuff. You didn't say no.
Exactly. Well, this also gets in your head.
Yep.
Right? Because as one of my mentors, Tony Robbins, he says, if you're in your head, you're dead. And what happens is when you start thinking about it, right, you start dwelling on it. Okay, how do I get out of this scenario? How do I move forward? And I'm just not enjoying it. Back to that fun factor, right? Because when you start getting lost in self-esteem, it's like everyone else is wrong. Typically, if everyone else is wrong, there's something that you're looking at wrong, potentially. Not always, right? But maybe there's a different approach you need to look at to figure out how to solve the solution. But when you start looking at this, it's like, okay, if this is really struggling, maybe I need a timeout.
Yep.
Maybe I'm burned out,
Yep.
right? And that happens too. If you're doing, say, 40, 60, or actually, I say 60, 80, 100 hours a week on your job, you're probably in burnout mode because you figure out how to work that forward. It's like, well, I have so many tasks, back to Rob's point. Okay, you're going to have more thrown on you. It's like, that's great, but I need more resources. I need to figure out how to delegate better, right? Because at that point, you have to, it's your self-driving, what's the I can't think of the right word. You're being self-driven. At that point, you really don't have a mentor or helping you through that. And when you start you start going to spiral, because what the brain does by default, we get in fight or flight. That's what we do, right?
Yeah.
Lots of studies on that, right? It's not just me saying it. There are lots of studies. We get fight or flight. Because we go fight or flight, we struggle all this, overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, you know, multiple different angles. It's like, I need timeout. That timeout could be a long weekend. That timeout could be an entire week. I need to go take a vacation, holiday somewhere, and come back. And I'm not talking about going and getting drunk. I don't recommend that. It's not going to help your situation. It's going to get worse in so many different ways.
Yeah, don't do it too often.
But it's easy to do. We can all talk about it and we laugh about it, right? It happens. We've all done it. But we also learn that let me ask the question, when that happens, what's usually the outcome? When we start thinking about, okay, what do we walk away and we kind of turn it off and we influence it with drugs or alcohol to help influence it. What usually happens?
Short-term solution. The problem's there when you recover, when you come out of it. You still have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right? So you should have maybe taken a little break, but then spent the energy and the time and the money on actually addressing the real situation so that you alleviate this.
Sometimes you take it out on your family too.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And that's a very key point, is how do you want to be seen, right? And I'm not talking about just short term, and you have the family side, you have personal, but more importantly, how do you feel inside? Because what you may not realize is what's turning inside of you is being seen externally.
Yep.
Right? And that's extremely important. You can talk about mindset, et cetera, all day long, but when you have that clarity to say, here's really what I want to do. We kind of started there, right? Here's our limitations. Here's that next step. Here's how we drive it. And politics or not, doesn't matter to me. See what we just did? We actually eliminated this and even being a politic conversation. And that's where I want to bring that back to kind of the foundation here is the politics when it comes to ITAM, SAM configuration management. We can talk about whether it's stakeholders, executives, any CTO, CFO, CIO, right? We could talk about the CEO, right? We could talk about vendor management. We could talk about vendors, right? And their politics, working with executives and working around what we need to do. It happens everywhere, right? But back to the foundation. If you know where you are and what you do and your own ethical decisions and how you want to approach this, and you know kind of the milestone markers you want to be at and how you want to be seen, as well as how you want to act, this all goes away.
Yeah.
From the perspective of you're addressing it differently and you're not getting caught up in someone else's ego. So today was a very hard, roll up the sleeves conversation you saw from all three of us, right? We're talking about multiple different angles. But again, this is the hard topics we have to deal with every day that no one talks about. It's the chatter that we talk amongst friends every once in a while, but we don't talk and say, how do we address it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where I want to make sure if we're going to put something and go live and have some do studies, we're going to talk about real topics. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about the real things. I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about FinOps. I'm not saying you shouldn't worry about OT, which we can totally talk about that too. And that's a lot of fun. But there's also these hard topics. And these hard topics, sometimes we skirt over, but realize these are the foundation to everything else. Right? So we've got the politics of ITAM, SAM, and configuration management. Totally. But again, if you don't have the foundation there, you don't understand how you're putting your framework in place. You don't understand, okay, how you have the building blocks to go on top of it. Those conversations, they can be political because your foundation's not stable, right? Yeah. So as we wrap this up, Deanna, any final thoughts that come to mind on this? Because this has been a hard topic.
Yeah, it is a hard topic. So I guess I have to get to know myself better before I try to present to somebody else. It's how you make yourself feel in your knowledge. And that because I'm the only person I can actually change.
I like that. That's good. That's good. Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, let's face it. If you're going to be dealing with another human being or group of human beings, all right, then politics is going to be a boundary and a necessary exercise and workflow, if you will, right? So you can avoid it, right? But if you can't avoid it, and then most of the time, maybe shouldn't avoid it, especially if you have goals or if you have deliverables that you've got to push through communication, then study it, understand it, know what drives it, understand the psychology behind it, so that you can approach an argument, or you can approach the politics in a way that results in objective, constructive outcomes. So you do that, right? That's as close as you can do to that, like that win-win scenario. So consider it from that viewpoint, because again, ultimately, you're going to have to deal with it at some point.
It's about being prepared.
Yeah.
Prepared for the unknown, being prepared for those uncomfortable situations. And if you don't like uncomfortable situations, I'll be honest, you're going to walk into it, right? This is just another one of those examples. And this one's a pretty hard one. This one's a really hard one. We all struggle with. And again, you're seeing 90 plus years of experience here on screen, and we're all struggling, right? Because there is no perfect answer. Everyone's human. That's what we're working with. This is not a machine on or off type of scenario. People like to leverage ITAM for that, but it's like, that's not us, right? Because we have the human aspect. And when you start figuring, okay, how do you work at the bigger picture? I mean, from everything Rob said, as well as Deanna, it's like, okay, work that on, right? It's like, do we know all the answers? No. Are we willing to learn more? Yes. Do we think politics is going to change on us? And it depends on wholesale. It could be, yes. And it's the best way to put it. Whether you deal with the government, whether you do a government entity for ITAM, SAM, or configuration management, and trust me, some of that stuff drives me insane. It's just not for me. That's just an example. It's just slowness and how they do it. But on the other side, because of how they structure it, they're trying to, as much as say, okay, slow, they're actually trying to be, I wouldn't say therapeutic, they're trying to be structured to make sure they're making the right decision. Yeah. So I totally respect that, right? Because on the commercial side, we try to skim over a lot of that. We try to skim over some of the formalities behind that. And so, again, when you talk about politics, it doesn't have to be government, it can be internal, it can be whatever. How are you working with it? How can you move that forward? That's the whole idea behind this. Again, we're getting the brass tacks, the hard stuff right here, talking about it, because there's one thing to say, okay, we have all these technology issues, the process, et cetera, but how do you actually apply these? How do you get people to get buy-in? Yeah. How do you make sure you have that alignment? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because when you get that figured out, you just grew. Mm-hmm. So thanks everyone for the contribution. This is great. Tomorrow, we're going to finish up our treasure map activities. We're going to talk about the solution consultants, the solution consultant role. And actually, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to talk about the topics we've been talking about the entire month. Can you believe we're at the end of February? It's insane. Yeah. I'm like, gosh, we're here, right? And we're going to wrap up the end of February because on the treasure map side, as solution consultant, as the educator. And that's what we're going to do, help bring it all together, because start thinking about that's really what we're doing. We're educating. Although we have to do a lot, but we're helping educate that. So we're going to summarize that, wrap that up. And then on Friday, we're going to do a kind of a wrap-up session. We're going to do the entire month on topics. Phenomenal stuff. There's a lot. And also in the next day or two, we're going to talk about what we're going to do next month. We're going to do a little bit, change up a little bit, but we're going to actually have a lot of fun, a lot of topics. And I think you're going to listen on the next couple of days to be there. So appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central. Look forward to see you guys tomorrow. So thank you for everything. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Rob, for the contributions on that. It's been a great session, and let's continue on. And you guys have yourself a great rest of the day, because you do live, you love, and matter. Just let's make it all happen, because that's how you're able to move forward.
Thanks so much.
So long, everyone.